Good morning. I'm Pamela D'Amato with IMSM. I'm an area manager, and welcome to our live session, IMSM's live session on R2, responsible recycling. And with that, I'm going to also introduce Maria, and Maria can go ahead and introduce Patty. And Nero, thank you for being with us today. And let's have a great session.
Thank you, Pamela. Hi, everyone. Hi, Patty. Hi, Nirio.
Hi.
So, I'm Maria Dimitrova at MSM, and I'm here with my colleagues, Pamela and Nirio, and our special guest, Patty McKenzie from the SERI. Why? Because we're very interested in talking about responsible recycling. So, Patty, your organization is truly international. However, there are people that may not know quite a lot about you. Can you please briefly introduce what you do, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for SERI. And SERI is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has oversight and development responsibility for the R2 standard. Um, our mission is really to create a world where electronic products are reused and recycled in a way that promotes resource preservation, the well being of the natural environment, and the health and safety of workers and communities. And the R2 program is one of the primary ways that we work to accomplish that mission. Uh, the R2 standard is a, a standard of best practices for recycling and reuse of used electronic products, beginning with that first use and all the way through end of life recycling.
Sounds really very interesting, and I would be very uh, happy if you at some point talk to our European customers as well and introduce them to R2. They know quite a lot about recycling, but they can only benefit from R2 and the best practices it introduces. So, can you
Well,
please carry on?
so sure. So, R2 is a global standard. We have almost 1,000 R2 certified facilities operating in 33 countries around the world.
Mm.
And it continues to grow because of supplier and customer demand. But the R2 standard itself was developed in response to growing concern about how used electronics are managed and processed. We've all seen, television programs or read articles about, the terrible consequences of improper management of used electronics. And so this is a problem that continues to rise as global demand for electronics increases around the world, and as devices become obsolete and they're replaced with greater frequency, and especially growing data security risks. So, all of those reasons went behind the development of R2. R2 it was first developed in 2008 by a multi stakeholder group. It represented, environmental groups, government agencies, small and large recyclers, refurbishers, also original equipment manufacturers. So all that to say, many voices went into the development of the R2 standard, which we think makes for a stronger standard. Some of the key areas covered by R2 um, are really well, the standard actually is really designed to, protect people, protect the environment, preserve resources, and safeguard data. And one thing that I just like to point out that R2 is really more than a management system certification. It's really a sustainability standard that focuses on outcomes and effectiveness and positive impacts. Um, as a foundation for R2, we require certification to an environmental health and safety management system. A couple options for this would be ISO 14001 for environment, as well as ISO 45001 for health and safety. Or another alternative that many folks choose is the RIOS standard, which is a single standard that combines environmental, health and safety, and quality best practices. Uh, Another important thing to know about R2 is some people think of R2 as a recycling standard, and while that's certainly part of it, it's really first and foremost a reuse standard. It The requirements are designed to preserve resources and support a more circular economy that maximizes the value of electronic devices as well as parts and components at all stages in the life cycle of that product, beginning with the first use. So R2 has, strong test and repair requirements, strong data security and sanitization requirements, as well as, strong quality controls to make sure that your systems are effective. Um, for companies that are doing test and repair, we also require a quality management certification such as ISO 9001. Again, RIOS is another option. It's that combined standard. Uh, Another thing uh, that is really driving the growth of R2 is that it supports local and national regulatory frameworks. So, R2 requires that facilities identify the state or provincial laws and regulations that pertain to what they do, as well as the local regulations, and that they put in place systems to make sure that they're meeting those legal requirements. Um, for companies that have international trading partners, R2 requires proof of legality for any transboundary movement of material. And that's really important because many times the generators of that material, the original users, can be held liable. If that equipment ends up in places where it doesn't belong. So that proof of legality is very important. Along with that, R2 has strong tracking requirements for downstream accountability, as well as strong, downstream vendor verification requirements. So it's not just enough that the R2 facility is managing equipment in a responsible way that meets R2 requirements, but they need to ensure that any downstream vendors that they're working with continue to do so. So
You mentioned, oh, sorry.
no, so I was just going to say,
No.
so those are some of the key things that you would find in the R2 standard.
I got very enthusiastic because you mentioned something I'm literally obsessed with, and it is information security and
Hmm.
how important R2 to information security might be. Indeed, it's all about these new issues with operational technology security, all those processors, controllers, embedded
Hmm.
systems that now are getting TPC enabled. They need to be reused, recycled, and disposed in a very safe way. So R2 becomes essential to all these companies that go from analog controllers, to put it simply,
Hmm.
towards TPC-enabled devices. Pamela Neary, we discussed it recently, didn't we?
Yes, and I was just wondering, just to be able to take advantage of Patty's knowledge as well. I personally have dealt and brought some clients on board to IMSM that do um, telephone repair, like iPhone, Android, where they not just repair, but they'll take in old phones, they'll refurbish them, and then resell them. I also have done a deal with somebody that melts down metal and scraps of metal. And then also another one that does computer components. So whether it be boards or little chips inside the computers, but what are some of the other ways that R2 has been exercised by people with businesses, small and large?
Well, we are seeing many new industry sectors relying on R2 certification for their third party service providers or ITAD providers. And that's because, you know, returns, for instance, make up such a huge part of the marketplace. Warranty repairs, and like as you mentioned, trade-ins for mobile phones. So many of those companies are relying on these third parties to handle that aspect of their business. A matter of fact, there was a study by Gartner that said. That found that 66% of those reporting increasingly use third parties to provide those types of services that are outside of their core business model. And so by using an R2 certified um, facility as that third party provider, that really reduces their risk. And so many companies, I know many large of phone providers, for instance, require R2 certification as a condition of even bidding on their product.
Yes.
Other online marketplaces such as Bstock, they have lots of people selling product, and many of them also require R2 certification. So that's just a really growing trend that is driving certification.
May I ask how long does it take for most companies to achieve certification?
That's a great question. I would say typically 6 to 12 months. There's some, things that so for a company that's already doing lots of things, at a high level, it's going to be simpler for them to document their processes and procedures, begin collecting, the evidence that's required for an audit. For other companies that need to implement a lot of new things, it's going to take them longer. So it also just depends on, do they have somebody dedicated, to achieving certification? Are they working with a consultant? All of those things can help to speed up the process, but typically 6 to 12 months.
And how about training resources?
We have a lot of training resources on our website that are free of charge. So, our website's
Mhm.
sustainableelectronics.org, and we have an R2 knowledge base that has more than 35 different training videos on each aspect of the standard. Um, Some are more introductory, level one. They kind of go do talk about it, the intent of the standard, while others are more in depth. They talk more about implementation, um, and actual specifics of the requirements. We also have lots of training articles and other resources. And so that's all free of charge on our website. Many consultants direct their clients to that. The consultants use that. Another thing that's of interest maybe to some of your customers or viewers is that our knowledge base has auto translation. So while auto translation is not perfect, it does make it more accessible around the world. We also have one-on-one consultations. So for companies that, they have that they've been kind of working on this, or consultants as well, we don't operate as a consulting firm. We're the owner of the standard. However, we're happy to provide one-on-one consultations with a facility or their team, or with, a consultant or consulting group, to answer some specific questions about their circumstance. And another resource that we have is our lead auditor course. So while that's while that started out being specifically for lead auditors that audit R2, consultants started asking, "Hey, we'd like to go." And actually, many facilities also sign up for that because it helps them to know what their auditor is going to be looking for. So, lots of great resources on our website.
We are talking electronics, but are there any other businesses that are eligible for R2 certification?
Well, R2, the scope of R2 really applies to any facility that exercises control over used electronics. And so when we're talking about electronics, we're talking specifically in R2 about information or communications technology. So while you could say a microwave oven is an electronic device, it's not information or communications
Mhm.
technology like a television or copier, printer, phone, computer. Um, so that's the scope of R2. So there are many different business models of R2 certified facilities. Some are very specific. They just do one thing, the test and repair of mobile phones or recycling of batteries, while others are more
Mhm.
full service and do test and repair and, data sanitization and that end of life recycling for things that are no longer have a useful life. So, um, there are many different types of R2 facilities, and the latest version of our standard, which we refer to as R2v3, uh, really recognizes the fact of the diversity and the specialization in the industry. And so it allows companies to tailor their certification based on the specific activities that we perform or that they perform. So the R2 standard has, core requirements that apply to all R2 certified facilities, but then it also has specialty process requirements that apply only to facilities, that engage in those specialized processes. So a company that certifies to test and repair and data sanitization, they're not performing perhaps, they may not have a shredder and they don't need to certify to the materials recovery requirements. So the fact that they can tailor their certification really also helps to, one, it gives their customers more information about what they do, but it also helps to contain audit costs and audit time.
Yeah, indeed. It's very interesting because nowadays we're talking about the Internet of Things and interconnected devices. So the scope is exponentially growing, in my understanding.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, we're working right now on adding a section to the standard, one of those specialty requirements. So it wouldn't apply to everyone, but for photovoltaic panel recycling. But you're right, as electronics, we're finding that in all sorts of products. The new version of the standard has been written so that we can more easily add those things as the need arises.
So has it been published yet?
For not for those new things. The R2v3 standard was published in July of 2020. So we're part of the way through our transition period. So right now, companies are transitioning to the new version of the standard, which is really places a lot more emphasis on testing and repair and data security and reuse of specialty electronics, like medical devices, maybe large telecom equipment. But adding those other sections, for the PV panels, that's in the works. So stay tuned.
Brilliant.
So may I ask a question, Patty? So somebody that has a 13485 certification as a medical device manufacturer, would they need, at what point would they need R2v3?
Well, I know that there are some R2 companies that they really specialize in medical equipment, and that's a big part of their business. And so some of their clients, like a hospital, for instance, they work with that hospital, and that hospital wants to know that um, that equipment is being properly managed, refurbished, or tested. Or in some cases, that medical specialty equipment, can't really be tested outside of a working environment. So R2 allows for verification of some of those specialty pieces, in order to extend the life of products when possible. But in that case, if it's only been verified and not actually fully tested, then they need to provide returns at no cost to the buyer of that equipment. But what that does is it allows for, you know, top of the line medical equipment that has been, now something new and better comes along, but that medical equipment that they're replacing still has valuable life, in another clinic or facility. So we want to extend that use whenever possible.
That's very helpful to know. So I even have a personal friend that has a medical device repairing company, and they work with imaging equipment and all different types of testing, surgical equipment. So that's something definitely I'm going to talk to them about.
Thanks. So what that R2 certification does is it just really provides another layer of accountability and security for the supplier of that equipment to make sure, you know, uh, data's, properly managed, to make sure that companies that sometimes people will auction their stuff off to the highest bidder, and maybe it's in a lot, and so that the bidder will cherry pick and sell the good things for premium, and the other stuff ends up where it doesn't belong, and that can come back to cause embarrassment and cost to that hospital or supplier of that equipment.
And hey, Patty, I have a question for you
Hmm.
actually. And thank you so much again. This has been enlightening, especially since I actually do have a couple of clients undergoing R2 right now. And, just kind of speaking about some of the different examples of in industries that might get involved and would benefit from R2. Typically, I've found that, yes, that they may be buying from, large retailers like AT&T or
Hmm.
Verizon, something like that, in which, R2 is certainly going to be a requirement. I've also run into examples of like commercial carters and junkers, right? In which case, I've seen them have to, if they're not certified, then outsource to and someone who's actually able to then intake some of the electronic equipment, that they're clearing out from these, commercial warehouses or whatever. Is that something you find typically as well?
Yeah. So the thing that companies need to think about is nobody's going to say, "Hey, I'll take your equipment and I'll keep the good stuff, and the rest, the other stuff, we won't bother to test because we're not going to make a good return on it." So nobody's going to say they're a shady operator or that they're cutting corners. But that's where R2 certification comes along, because self-made claims, you can't rely on them. Morgan Stanley found that out. They were in the news, not long ago, a $60 million settlement because they hired an ITAD. I don't know if all your viewers know that, IT, asset disposition. So there are a lot of ITAD facilities that are R2 certified. So they hired an ITAD facility, to um, take their servers, but that ITAD facility, you know, didn't do what they needed to do, and Morgan Stanley was left holding the bag and is paying out $60 million in fines. And in addition, I believe they have another 6 or 7 lawsuits that are pending, regarding other issues. So um, what R2 certification does is it requires annual audits. It's not just, a one-time visit of a facility, but it's annual audits that look at testing and tracking information, bills of lading, all of those things, so that they can see throughout the year that that facility has been operating in conformance to R2. And so that gives customers and suppliers confidence.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Brilliant questions, guys. So, Patty, how could organization approach you for training, let's say, mm, to train the people as lead auditors?
Sure. Well, the first thing, if you're new to R2, what I would really recommend doing is taking the Intro to R2 webinar, and you can access that, sign up for it on our website. That's a 90-minute overview of R2 requirements. Um, Also, s- it talks about some of the costs associated with certification. Then on our knowledge base, those 35 or 37 videos that we have, that would be the next place to start. And that is actually a prerequisite to watch all those videos before taking that lead auditor course. The lead auditor course is a 3 or 4 day course, just depending on uh, how they break that up, but that's an online course. That there is a fee for the lead auditor
Mhm.
class, but again, that's a great way to not only understand the requirement, but understand the evidence and how to interpret and understand what auditors are looking at, and again, for facilities to understand what their auditors are looking for during the audit. And then I talk to folks every day, so they are very welcome to call or email me directly. I don't know if you have my information uh, on a link, but they can email me at Patty, Patty, at electronics.org, and I'm happy to answer questions, put them in touch with the right information, or they can give me a phone call, and I'd love to talk with them.
Just a second. Marketing, can you please bring Patty's email address on screen for our attendees to see it?
And my phone number, if people would rather call, is 202-921-2261.
Just
So
a
that's my
second.
direct line.
We'll probably manage to get all the information on screen shortly,
Great.
Patty.
Great.
1 second. Let me see. Here we go.
Thank you.
There we go. Yes, please. Just to make sure. Marketing, please, would you add the +1 in front of the number for Patty? Thank you.
Perfect.
So, thank you, Patty, for sharing your contact details with us.
My
And
pleasure.
for such
You know what? I just wanted to
interesting
make
talk.
one more note, if I may.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Our intro webinar, we offer it at many different time zones to accommodate people all around the world. And I'm also happy to schedule special calls or meetings, for people in other time zones, because we are an international standard.
Brilliant. Pamela and Irio, do you have any further questions for Patty?
No, very helpful. Thank you so much, Patty. I'm sure
Thank you.
many other people will be helped and be able to gain a lot of insight and information from the session. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Right. Same. And I really appreciate it. It was a really excellent conversation. And I appreciate you sharing your contact details, because if I have questions down the line, I'll certainly reach out to you.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Pamela and Irio, for your time. It has been a lovely session again. I enjoy very much talking to you. And we shall say thank you to our attendees as well, and ask Caroline from marketing to take over and finalize this session for us.